the numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Zerl. With me, as always, is
Coach Nez, and
we got Alex Calise with us. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Great. You can visit our podcast at zpnetwork.com, zoicsonline.com. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all your podcatchers. Subscribe to the show, rate and review the show. We'll read your review on the air. And our sponsors are...
Ragged Records in Davenport, Iowa, and Rock Island, Illinois. But right now it's only Rock Island, Illinois, because they're recovering from the flood. We also have Legends Guitar Picks out of Milan, Illinois, and RockstarPicks.rocks out of Queens, New York.
We're on Facebook, Twitter, No Shock Pods, our handle. And we are on Rock Rage Radio Sundays at 2 p.m. Central Time. Also... coming to the area, Ghost, October 8th, and Godsmack and Hailstorm, September 22nd. All right, we got all that out of the way. Alex is one of the first people I interviewed way back in the day, and we've always kind of been Facebook friends, so I'm glad to have her back on the podcast. She's been on before. So what are you up to right now?
Oh my gosh, I'm up to so much. I have my solo project going on. I have Bat Farm, my other band, going on. But Bat Farm is what I'm concentrating on primarily these days. That's
awesome. What is in 2019, it's such a hard, really since probably the last 20 years, it's been such a hard time in the music industry, especially at, the era you come up in. How do you define success in this era of music?
You know what? I really think that success just in general has to come from within, because if you sit there and you try to compare yourself to other people, you're just going to be severely disappointed, especially, with the way the music landscape has changed over the past even 10 years. We just try to, really count our little victories that we have, like even, getting like placements on TV shows and stuff. And, you just have to really consider the little victories, like I said. Otherwise you're going to be in a world of hurt the way that things have been going over the past few years. So,
is that something you've struggled with at all, trying to wrap your head around that part of the industry?
Oh God, yeah. It's so weird, just how everything has dramatically changed in the past 10 years. Like I said, I used to completely make a living from download sales, but now that's kind of become a thing of the past. People are really not doing that so much anymore. So you're just getting pennies on the dollar for streaming. So artists are having to find different ways to generate income. And, we're constantly trying to reinvent ourselves and figure out ways to monetize. And a lot of it is through content creation now.
Yeah. And you have your hands dipped in a lot of different pots. You've been acting, you've done modeling, you're in at least two bands, or your solo project in Bat Farm. How necessary is it to have, so many things, being involved in so many things at one time?
It's completely necessary now, and you see this on all levels. Even people that are in the top 1 percentile. Mm-hmm. Like somebody like I'm trying to think, like Gwen Stefani, for example. She's got her Vegas show going on now, her Vegas residency. She's on The Voice. She has her hand in about 1,000 different pots too, and I think that's the only way these days to really stay relevant and keep generating income, because there is no money in music anymore at all. Really.
I guess my question to you is, and we just got done with an episode before you came on, is when you have your fingers involved with so many things, I guess what becomes the priority, or what becomes the top of the food chain for you, and then how do you work your way down from that?
Well, at this stage, with music, that's my number one, and everything kind of, that I do on the side, and I do consider it on the side, is just to facilitate my main love, because if I'm not practicing, if I'm not writing, if I'm not doing all that other stuff, then I'm not happy, and I don't want those other things to have to take over. So I'm trying to get to the point where eventually the music is the thing that really generates the most income.
Yeah.
I've been, a fan of yours since the beginning. From the second you sent me the album, was it In Avanti? I was just like, oh my God, there's like 7 hits on here. And then, but it's frustrating to know that, I'm thinking this is going to be the biggest star in the world. And then, you got a little success off it. Cry still to this day, is relevant as far, it's popped up on Dance Moms and other things. And then obviously I was a big fan, still am. It's now Bat Farm was Sound of Cancer. In terms of writing and direction, how has, that evolved over the years as you get older?
In terms of my writing style and everything?
Yeah, especially between the two, your solo project and the band.
Well, with Bat Farm, I get to be a little more creative, especially when it comes to harmonies and stuff like that. I can really play a lot more. I mean, I can definitely do that with my solo project as well, but there's always been some other personality that's been involved with that too, and it's usually a producer. But with Bat Farm, I feel like, especially when I'm working with Dennis Morehouse, who is also my best friend, it's very collaborative. And I haven't always found that with my solo project, unfortunately. And you would think being a solo project that it's 100% solo, and it's really not. There were a lot of personalities involved with that. But with Bat Farm, I feel like I can really be me, and I get my rocks off creatively a little bit more with that. But over the years, my writing style has definitely changed in that, I've gotten older. I just turned 34 the other day. So, if you don't grow and evolve and change, and that's a problem. So, I think it's just, my life experiences has really dictated, my writing. I know a lot more than I used to. I don't know everything, but I like to think that I've learned a lot since In Avanti came out,
Yeah. Watching the videos that you've been releasing for Bat Farm, listen to music, it sounds like you guys are having so much fun right now. It was, when it first started, it was kind of not quite proggy, but definitely art rock. I mean, there was definitely this, like you were saying, creative, artistic side to it. But you guys just sound like you're having so much fun at this point. Is that, is that all for the camera, or is that authentic? Sorry.
Oh no, that's 100% authentic. We're absolute idiots, and we're not afraid to show it. So if you've seen like the Christmas video we did, or some of the other stuff that we did, we have no problem just being our idiot selves, and we just kind of let go. We really let go when we did the cover of Six Underground, and we did that car video, the carpool karaoke kind of video, and we're just like, screw it, let's just have fun, because at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, it's not worth it, especially in this musical climate now.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the key, is you don't have to have money to have fun. The guy who lives in a trailer park that just, works 10 hours a day, gets home and just drinks his beer and sits off with his buddies, he's having a great time. He's happy, so you don't have to be, it's all about finding that happiness. And, I'm a big fan, and we're definitely rooting for you. And another thing you've jumped onto is PR stuff. And one of the guests of the show this episode is Rachael Sage. And you brought her to us. How did you get involved with the PR stuff?
So how I got involved with her actually is we have the Dance Moms connection, because she's had a lot of cuts on that show as well. I think she's had about 22 or something, which is really impressive. And we've always been friends, like on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. And then, I just, started doing the PR thing, and I happened to put up a post on Facebook advertising it and saying, hey, if you, any artists out there, if you need some PR help, just hit me up, and she ended up hitting me up, and I guess the rest is kind of history. And it's been easy to some degree, really, promoting Rachael, because she's very talented. She has a really awesome track record and a large body of work. So, it's been a real pleasure, doing PR for her. And for the most part, or actually, this is 100% true. I don't get behind anyone that I'm not a fan of. I can't, because it's not authentic then.
No, that's awesome. And I'm really excited actually for you to hear the interview. We're kind of a rock halfway metal podcast, and she's definitely, outside of our general, we do try to be broad, but she definitely, I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. I really enjoyed this episode with her, and I'm excited for you to hear it.
Yeah, and she's very well spoken and very intelligent. And I always gravitate, to people that are like that. And just in the few times that I've spoken with her, I've very much admired that about her, and her work ethic is kind of astounding. In that she's not only a great performing artist, but she's also spearheading her own label, which is awesome. And she's been doing it for like 20 years. It's really cool.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you so much for doing this kind of impromptu interview. I'm sure you can tell I'm stumbling all over myself, but
thank you guys.
Is there anything you want to promote before we throw it to Rachael?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Bat Farm just released a new single called "Now That You're Gone," and it is a very moving song about the aftermath of someone taking their own life. So it's I'm a huge advocate for mental health awareness, being that I suffer from depression myself. So it's a song that's very much from the heart, and I think will really resonate with people.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And like I said, I've been a fan and rooting for you ever since I've known you. So I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you giving us Rachael for this episode.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. It's been really, really great catching up again. Seriously.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Hello?
Hello, Rachael?
Yes, hi. How are you?
Hey, good. It's Bob from the Nothing Shocking podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Are you recording us right now? Or,
yeah, I got it. I got it recording right now, and I also have my co-host Eric here with me.
Hello.
Okay, terrific. Hi. How are you?
Fantastic.
So,
can I check something real quick? Are you able to hear me when I put you on speakerphone? Just a second.
All right.
How's that? Does that work too?
I can hear you. There's kind of an echo, but I can hear you.
Okay, well then I will take that off. I was checking. Okay. Well, great. Thanks for getting in touch, and I'm happy to be chatting with y'all.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, first of all, because I know how it's hard, especially recording in the afternoon. A lot of people like to do the window thing. And,
no worries. I'm actually in New York, so it's 7:18 for me right now.
So are you on tour right now? Is that what's going on?
I actually just got home late last night from Los Angeles, so it's my first day back, and I'm just deep in catch-up mode, that first overwhelming day back after a tour when you don't quite know where to begin with the rest of your life.
How do your tours go? Do you do like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or do you do like?
There's really no norm. It just depends completely on the type of run that I have. I do some of my own booking, and then my record label Empress does some. And when I'm overseas, I have a UK agent. So between all of us, we just try to fill my dance card, so to speak. And it really depends just on the nature of the tour. But this last couple weeks, I was out on the West Coast. I was in Arizona and California, and I had a nice stretch of some really lovely shows in LA, San Francisco, a few other places. So it was a lot of fun.
I'm always curious to know, as a singer, how many days in a row can you go before your voice needs a break? Because I know a lot of bands, it seems like a lot can only do like 5, but like for you, what is the kind of the max?
That's a really interesting question. Again, it sort of depends on how much sleep you're getting a night and how long the drives are every day. So, for instance, if I'm on a run of shows in Europe or in the UK where everything is kind of close together and we're only driving an hour or two between shows and we're getting plenty of sleep a night, like 6, 7, 8 hours, then it's actually better not to really stop. I love just playing and playing, playing. But, like the last couple of weeks, we had really long drives, 5, 6, 7 hours between shows. And that gets a little bit trickier because, you just get worn out and you're getting more like 5 hours sleep a night and you just get more tired. So it's pretty logical. It's kind of like, if you're getting rest and you're eating well, you can be an Energizer bunny. And if you're not, like in anything else in life, anybody else who's doing any kind of work, I think you just get run down by nature, and then you better have a day or two off after a few days.
The question I have is, how do you compare and contrast, the anticipation for taking off on a tour, opposed to coming home that first day back from a tour? Are they kind of similar? Are you kind of running around like crazy? Where your energy's at? How does that all work for you?
I love your questions. These are different from what I usually get. They're very practical and relevant right now. So, I think it's completely different, actually. The anticipation for going on a tour is like, the really good kind of butterflies. It's something that I'm really looking forward to, and I may procrastinate and not even pack until that morning or that night if I'm leaving at night. But coming back is always a little bit melancholic, I would say, because I'm coming back to my normal life, the everyday and the stuff that I've put off for a bit while I've been away performing and playing for audiences and having that amazing adventure. So while it's great to sleep in my own bed again, it's also kind of sad every time the plane touches down at LaGuardia or wherever I come in from, and I suddenly have this flood of realizations of everything I've gotten to be late on, paying my bills, stocking my fridge, working at my record label, checking my emails, and it can be a little bit overwhelming for the first day or two until you catch up. And then, you kind of get back into your routine, maybe see some friends. So.
I've had a couple of friends, they've tried to quote unquote make it, and then, as soon as they get a little success, or they get a tour, or they get signed, or they get to make an album, it seems like you've finally gotten there. But then that's really when the work starts. I mean, is that, how do you kind of, I guess when you get there, can you kind of let us know that experience once you kind of know that all of a sudden it's for real, and what kind of work you have to do to keep it going?
Wow. For me, it's just been this really sort of consistent, perpetual process since my early 20s, really, when I first started doing this. Maybe I was 24, 25. My very first tour with Ani DeFranco kind of kick-started me into live touring as an independent artist, and it was something I realized pretty quickly I absolutely loved. And I wanted to devote a lot of energy and focus trying to do that as much as I possibly could, so I could also become better and better as a live performer and just continue to develop on the road in front of audiences. So for me, of course, it's very hard work, and it takes a lot of stamina and drive. But I find that it's the other stuff, the business stuff, trying to book the gigs and connect with different people who can help promote you as an artist. All that music business stuff that's more challenging and more, maybe not draining isn't the right word, but just, it takes more energy. And it requires a different type of dedication, that not everybody has. Some people just love to play, and they're not necessarily, up for putting in all that extra work to get the word out about their shows, or to, get to the next level with self-promotion and posting on the socials and all that stuff. So, I love playing. I would play every day for the rest of my life if I could, but you have to take some time to regroup and to find that balance between, being healthy, seeing your loved ones, kind of renewing your spirit, here and there, and just, having more life experiences so that you have that fuel to get back on the road when you're ready.
We interview many artists, and they have different philosophies on performing and where they're at as far as what they enjoy more, the studio time or the playing live time. Where are you at? A lot of our artists say they love being in the studio and creating, opposed to playing it live after the creation part is over with. How do you feel about that?
It really fluctuates for me. I think when I'm deep in one mode or the other, I enjoy what I'm doing then, and it's hard to sort of envision leaving that to do the other. So when I'm in the middle of making an album or at the very beginning of that process, I'm so excited about that. And, I'm in the studio and it feels like that's where I want to be indefinitely. And then when I'm on a big, long tour and I'm deep in that groove, that's how that feels. So it's a little bit jarring to shift gears from one to the other for me. But, over the long haul, I think it's a really healthy thing to be flipping back between the two, because they are so different and one really informs the other. For instance, if I write a new batch of tunes, maybe during a down season when I'm not playing out much, like in the winter when I don't feel like touring because it's freezing or whatever, then I hunker down and I go into the studio and I get into this sort of bubble of creativity, recording-wise. And then by the time I'm completed with that, it's exciting to bring those songs out on the road. I think I'm just, most into whichever one I'm doing at the time. And it's a real gift to be able to do both, pretty equally throughout the year.
You seem to have a really positive, vision of all this. A lot of people we talk to, it's like they get sick of one towards the end of it, and they need to do the other to miss it. When you start to miss doing the, it keeps everything fresh, kind of like you said. But is it, where does that positivity come from? Is it something that you've kind of always had, something you had to get over time, or is that just part of what being an independent artist gives you a little more freedom than, being tied down?
Boy, are you really great at this? I love your questions. I first of all, I'm flattered that you hear positivity when I'm talking about these things, because, the bottom line is I'm really, really fortunate, and I have an enormous amount of gratitude just to be able to do this, to be able to be an artist and have, various opportunities to see the world in this very, eclectic and dynamic way. I've always wanted to be someone who had the opportunity to meet all different kinds of people, go all different kinds of places, and whether that was literal or figurative, like when I was an actress, I loved being in plays because that transported me somewhere else, and I got to sort of view the world in a different way. For me, it's all really about storytelling and about listening to other people's stories. So any way that I'm, enabled to do that and to put those experiences back into my work as a musician or as a painter, as a poet, whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to always be grateful for that, because I don't really take any of it for granted. A lot of people want to be doing that and living an artist's life, and they maybe don't have the opportunity. So, I think as long as you kind of keep that in mind as you go through your days, it sort of keeps you in check.
You mentioned the business side earlier, and, in this era, it almost feels like, you have to be creative as a business person to really to stick around and last in the industry without getting burnt out. Do you do you kind of agree with that, or is that something that's kind of always been there? I mean, you've been around for a while. Has that changed
Yes.
I mean, because it said you started in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, but how has it
That's
changed, I
right,
guess?
yeah.
How has it changed for you
Well,
throughout your career?
I think the access to the technology for so many different types of people to be able to create recordings and to learn that technology and share creative ideas, that has vastly exploded, as you know, and just the advent of Pro Tools and, everybody having laptops and all of that. I think all of that was really amazing because it leveled the playing field and it wasn't as rarefied for someone to get discovered and then sort of anointed by the powers that be that they're allowed to go make a record. I think all of that is really positive. But on the flip side, of course, it makes it more difficult to kind of carve your own niche and to be heard when the landscape is so full of so many different people pursuing the same dream. So, I think it helped that I have a dance background, that I was a ballet dancer as a young person, and sort of being faced with that ongoing, competition and ability to sort of face rejection. All of these things gave me a really thick skin, and it sort of distilled my desire to really do it because I wanted to, not because of some external pressure. So I think my drive as an artist has been a big blessing for me. And I just always try to remember, why I'm doing this. And the real reason is because I love to connect with an audience. I'm just a natural performer and I want to communicate. So you just kind of keep that in mind. And then all the other stuff, you can sort of roll with the punches and have the fuel to deal with those challenges.
You spoke about the technology. It makes it more accessible for artists to make their albums now if they can do it right inside their own home. But we've also seen where technology has aided artists that really can't play an instrument the ability to make an album too. Where are your thoughts on all that? Technology is so good in so many ways, but sometimes it's so good it makes artists a non-artist an artist, I guess. Am I saying that correctly?
Sure. I mean, I think what you're saying is that you think sometimes it can polish, the rough edges so much that it makes it harder for us to determine who's really kind of got the goods.
Right.
That's sort of what you're saying.
Exactly.
I mean, the thing with recording is it really is its own medium, and I think at the end of the day, if a track or a recording touches people, if it speaks to people, I'm not as hung up on how it was created. If it takes 30 people to make that recording, but they all had some unified vision, and at the end of the day, it touches people, and we don't really know how it was put together, but it has an impact. I'm all about it, but by the same token, my personal tastes tend to skew a bit more organic, as you can imagine. So I love artists who are really, trying to capture performances in the studio. But, I grew up loving the Beatles, and they did a lot of studio trickery before anybody else did. So I kind of, I have fun sort of imagining what artists like them what they would be doing today. I think they would be using the technology really creatively. And at the end of the day, it's about ideas and expression and, just trying to be creative and do something as unique as possible. Obviously, all the notes have been played in one form or another, but I think if we're all sort of pursuing some ideal that we have in our minds or in our spirits, it's going to come out and reflect that. And that's what's so great about music.
It is funny you mentioned the Beatles and the technology today. Not always, but every now and then I ask the question, do you think, Sgt. Pepper's could exist or something like that today? And I mean, I personally think it could with the technology. They would have got there in their own way because they're artists. But I guess I don't even know where I'm going with that. It's just more of a statement.
No, that's an amazing point. I mean, there are definitely contexts in which limitations boost creativity, and I do try to relearn that lesson often. And sometimes that's why I work with a co-producer. For instance, if I'm working with a co-producer who thinks I'm, doing too many passes of a vocal take and that I just don't have it that day and I should come back another day and try to get it in 3 takes instead of 20, on a day where I don't sound so great, that's a good voice of reason to have in the room. I tend to be someone who will kind of hyper-focus and bang my head against the wall a little bit. I'm a little obsessive and I'm a perfectionist. So, sometimes that works in my favor, but other times I think it's just about capturing a vibe. And there have been recordings where I did something in 1 take and it wasn't perfect, but I had the good sense to listen to someone else in the room who said, you know what, this is good. Don't screw it up. Don't mess it up. Leave it alone. Don't gild the lily, so to speak. So,
inspiration-wise, when you're in the studio, and we've had artists that believe that renting out a studio the old-fashioned way for X amount of weeks is the best way for them to be inspired. We have others that they want to do it in their own home. We've had some unique situations where artists have told us, like, hey, I can't record. I got to go to the studio, but I can't do it during the day. I can't do it when the sun's shining outside. I have to do it at night. We've had artists that they had to record on 3rd shift in the middle of the night. Where are you at? Are you one that can record in a studio on a bright sunny day, or do you like to do it in the evenings? How does it work for you?
Well, I prefer to record at night. I prefer to sing at night. But I can work all day long on anything else but, playing my keyboard parts, recording the basic tracks with the band. And if I'm working with an engineer or a producer who is only available in the daytime, as has been the case for the album I've just begun recording for my next release, I'm working with someone who has a little girl and, he has to be home at night with his wife and kid, and I want to work with him. So you have to be flexible. I mean, if you have such strict rules that it precludes you from working with the people you want to collaborate with, you got to kind of take a second look at your process, I think. And, they always say rules are made to be broken. So while I know myself and I'm a bit of a vampire by nature, I'll get on an earlier schedule if that's what it takes. And same thing for live touring. Of course, I'd love to sleep till 10 or 11 every day, roll out of the hotel at noon and, then head to the next city. But sometimes we have to get up at 6 a.m. to get to the next place in time, and you just have to be flexible. So,
I've been avoiding talking about your record that's out now because it's one of those words I can't say. I know how to say it in my head.
Myopia.
I can't say it out loud. It's just one of those words.
Yes, and the acoustic version is pseudomyopia. Let's say it together. Pseudomyopia. There it is.
In 2018, 2019, how do you define a success? Do you know that when you're done with the record, or do you actually look at units and all that stuff?
Well, I think the most obvious answer for me is that I don't define success. I just don't know if that's the crux of anything for me at this point, or rather, just the ability to do it and the opportunity to get out there and be creating my art and sharing it with people professionally is in and of itself success. I run a record label, and of course we need to sustain what we're doing, and we work with other artists who are on the road, and we're always pushing as hard as we can to promote them and seek greater opportunities for them. For instance, I just signed a distribution deal in South Korea, which is exciting. So I get to share my most recent material with that whole new audience. And of course, we're doing everything we can to spread the word in that part of the world now. But, ultimately, I'm trying to be as present as I can and really enjoy the process. And I think maybe that's something that's a little bit more recent for me in the last couple of years. Maybe it started with, actually having one of my childhood dreams come true in the form of touring with Howard Jones, whose poster used to be up on my, home studio wall as a teenager. And I really had to pinch myself literally and just remind myself, like, Rachel, this was your dream. Like, don't, take it for granted. This is something to really be grateful for and to enjoy every moment of the ride. And I try to take that approach to everything I'm doing now across the board.
I guess this is a kind of a question from when you began to where you're at now. As far as writing your songs, maturity-wise, how have you felt as though that your writing has matured as from where you were at in 1998? Is that right, with Smashing Serene to now? How's that changed? How's it worked for you?
I mean, that's really interesting. I don't know that it's necessarily about how much it's matured for me. I'm probably the worst person to assess that because I'm doing it. I'll leave that to the critics. But it's definitely shifted, and I think the main way that it's shifted is it's probably pretty predictable. I mean, we all know teenagers and tweens and people in their early 20s who are very, appropriately very absorbed in their emotions and what they're going through. That seems so urgent, and it's, because you're developing who you are as a person and your voice as an artist and the sound that you want to create. Just everything seems very, life or death. It really seems like it's so crucial. And that kind of passion and urgency is something that, I try to hearken back to sometimes, but, on the flip side, I think I'm a lot more calm now, and a lot more reflective. So I'm able to take in a lot more of what's going on with other people's lives around me and the state of the world and the political landscape, and to kind of get out of myself and out of my head. So I think my range as a writer has probably just expanded in that way.
I think it's neat how, record to record is kind of like a photo album. This is where you are in this moment of time. And, we're talking about myopia and pseudo-myopia now. Sorry, I'm going to almost butcher that every time I say it. But you're working on the next record now. Are you kind of already moved on past that? Or is it, are you able to, maybe not are you able to, but is that kind of how it works when you're done with it? Are you kind of done with it and then you're moving on to the next thing? Or,
Nah, no. I mean, this is why I love playing live so much. We did a couple concerts this past weekend that were 2 sets of an hour apiece. And it was such a luxury because I was with my my collaborator, Kelly Halloran, who plays violin and sings with me. And we had this amazing opportunity to play, 120 minutes worth of music. And it was really fun to put those set lists together and to ask the audience if they had any requests. And I think it's really healthy for artists to continually be dipping back into their older catalog and maybe reviving songs that might mean something totally different now. So for me, while recordings may eventually be finalized and, completed as they're released into the world, the process of music evolving live, it continues for me. And a lot of the tunes that I've recorded, I continue to mess with live, and I might even change some of the lyrics or adjust the solo improvisation for the piano. So I think in that sense, I'm a little bit of a jazz artist in addition to being, a pop folk artist. So I embrace that continual process of change with the material.
Creations of set list, you have a large body of work. I guess when it comes down to it, when you're preparing for a tour, how do you create your set list? I mean, are there just certain songs that are go-tos for you every time you go out on tour? Or is there things that you dip at, like, hey, we haven't played this in a while or a year or whatever? How does that work?
I think it's probably not that different from packing for a trip, trying to figure out, like, what do I want to wear over the next month? What colors do I feel like now? Am I into pants? Am I into skirts? Am I wearing my glasses or my contacts? It's kind of like, who am I right now? and what other parts might I feel like playing within the next month. And sometimes there are songs that just don't feel like they fit in your life in that moment, or there might be songs that people have requested, and of course you want to, put on the show that people want to see, as well as express exactly, what you want to do right now. So it's just kind of an organic process. There are tunes that I wish I had kept playing over the last decade that I've forgotten now, that I would completely need to relearn from scratch, that I've forgotten how to play if someone requested them. So sometimes I have to go back to the drawing board and literally relearn old material, which is also a healthy challenge. But then there are a handful of tunes like Brave Dancing and Try, 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 Sister Song that have just stuck around in the repertoire. And, that must be some kind of reflection on how seminal they are for me as an artist.
You've mentioned your record label a couple of different times, and you've had that for quite a while now. What brought you to
21 years?
What brought you to start it, and how hard has it been to, especially in this, because it seemed like you started right when the music industry fell apart. How hard has it been to sustain over the last 21 years?
I think I started it before the industry fell apart. That's what made it a little bit novel at the time. There were a lot of healthy major labels happening then, and a lot of my peers who I was hanging out with in New York City were signed to major labels or in the process of being signed. I think it was just, something about, my upbringing and that sense that if I saw someone doing something that seemed like I could do it, I saw that as a healthy challenge. And when I was in college, I became aware of artists like Indigo Girls, who had put out the first release or two on their own, and Anita Franco, Lorena McKennett, artists who had their own imprints, even if they had major label distribution. And I was very attracted to that idea of self-developing and not being told what to do, and just having the chance to really figure out who you are and what your voice is as an artist, rather than having a bunch of people tell you by committee, how to look, how to sound, what to play. That just turned me off, and that's just my nature. So I dove in, and I haven't really looked back since.
What has been the key, because you have been making records and you keep, like we just said, Myopia and Pseudomyopia are out right now.
Yes.
What, is it the physical copy? Is it the download, a combination of the two, taking them on tour? What is the best way to, I'm an accountant by day, so I always go to the business questions. But, what's the best way to really, make an album work, to, keep it sustainable?
I think you have to be where all of the action is. I think there are people who exclusively want to stream it, and then there are people who continue to want to buy it physically. There are people at my live shows who only want the vinyl, and I'm always listening to what people may say they want and trying to kind of modify what I do by nature to the nature of the business, and that is the challenge. And sometimes those are aspects of the business that that aren't always fun, because change can be painful or difficult. But I love making artwork to accompany my CDs, for instance. So it's a little bit sad to me to envision a music business where there's really no room for physical artwork. But at the same time, I'm a graphic designer, so there are probably other new creative ways to share artwork on social media, or creating exclusive merchandising that could be just as creative, and I just haven't figured it out yet. So, I don't really have all the answers, but I'm always trying to learn from what everybody else is doing, but also just to really sort of listen to my own inner creative voice and see where that leads me.
Do you think kind of the key to really having sustainable success right now is just trying to keep your fingers in as many pots as possible, whether it be being a graphic artist and doing stuff for other people, or being a songwriter or a producer or a record label owner. Is that kind of the key, along with being an artist, to truly being able to have a career?
It can help. It's it's something that has helped me, but I don't know that that's necessarily the paradigm for everybody. I mean, there are some people who are just so excellent at one or two things, and those are the things they should do. Having a niche can be an amazing thing, whereas there are other people who swear by having a day job that then they can turn on and off, and it sustains them, and then they can go out and play their shows, or maybe they work remotely. I think that's wonderful too. I think there is no one answer. I know people who are doing it a whole bunch of different ways. But you definitely have to find a way that doesn't burn you out, individually as an artist. And that's something that my old friend Derek Sivers, who used to run CD Baby and who was quite a pioneer in indie music, he used to really emphasize that to all of us as an independent community. If what you're doing is burning you out and you feel fried and sort of deflated, and you're just kind of doing it because you decided a long time ago you got to keep doing it, take a good hard look at your process, and that's not really the right path for you probably. So for me personally, I find a lot of strength and inspiration in touring and in that interaction between myself and the audience. So I'm really aware of that. And when I'm off the road for too long, I do start to get a little antsy and miss that. So
you said something really interesting earlier when I asked how you define success, and you said you couldn't. And it seems like a lot of people, like me personally, I think the main reason I'm not an artist is because I wanted to be, Joe Perry from Aerosmith. I didn't want to be an artist. I wanted to be the guy on the stage already. But in today's landscape, it's almost there's a little more freedom, I think. I don't think you have record labels tying you down, and you get to chase your art rather than chasing the success. There's not going to be a lot of stadium artists anymore, but there's plenty of niches out there for everybody. Is that kind of the way the landscape has developed over the last 20 years? Or has it always been that way?
Well, I mean, that's the world that I live in because I'm not a stadium artist. So I can't really speak for those that continue to aspire to that and are actually in that realm. I mean, there are artists like Sarah Bareilles who, began on a smaller, more intimate level, and then they blew up because of their success, and what they did resonated at such a high level that now they are playing stadiums. So I think it's still always like a dream for everyone that at some point maybe what they're doing will connect at that level, and you want to be ready for that, and you certainly wouldn't reject it. But it can't be why you're doing it, or you'll definitely give up along the way, because it's, that's just one in a zillion chances that that's going to happen. So, for me personally, it's really the act of creating and then the kind of consequent follow-up of performing and sharing what I've created that keeps me, just engaged with the whole process. And I should also mention, I absolutely love, creating visual art and, doing a lot of other creative things that sort of mix it all up for me and help me feel like I've got some balance. I'm not just always doing the same exact thing, because I think that can be a rut as well. You have to, be on input as well as output and make sure you're actually experiencing your life so that you have something to write about.
I've really enjoyed this conversation so far, but I feel bad we have hardly mentioned the two albums that are out, the Myopia. But, I mean...
Well, you've asked me a lot of questions about my vision about art and the process, and I really appreciate that. The albums ultimately are really about that word, vision, and how we see the world around us, and when things become so narrow that we stop really looking beyond our immediate circumstances. So, it all sort of relates. I think you did a good job.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Before we let you go, is there anything else you want to plug?
Well, sure. I forget where you're based exactly. Where is your show based?
We are based kind of 3 hours from everywhere. We're by Chicago, Milwaukee, Peoria,
Awesome.
Des Moines. We're kind of right in the middle of all of that. So
Okay. Well, I have a little Midwest swing coming up next week, so I will be in Chicago and Minneapolis, and people can check out my upcoming tour dates at rachelsage.com. And I'm really excited to bring my Studio Myopia release tour to a city near you. So hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Have a great night.
Good night.
You too. Bye.
You there?
I'll be broadcasting